Okay. I'm going to continue Siman Kuf Ayin Aleph. Some more Nekudas continue where we stopped. We're in the middle of Sif Ches. Continuing on the dinim of Gudei Agud, and hope to finish today what's relevant to Siman Kuf Ayin Aleph. Not everything, but some of the Nekudas which are relevant, and we'll continue further shiurim on other Simanim. The Mechaber writes in Seif Ches, in the middle of it, the Mechaber continues where we stopped in last year. And over there is something which is made to be used every day, like a merchatz. And we don't do chalukah year, or day, whatever it is. Each one could come use it every day. And the Mechaber then says the same thing applies to anything which is you could use together and is not made to be rented out, like a Sefer Torah, means books that you used to study, and each one could use them every day, and you don't divide it each day, because each person could say, I need to use this every day, and therefore I can't do one day I will study Torah and one day I won't study Torah. One day I will take a shower, one day I won't take a shower. It's not how it works. The things that could be used by both each day, both of them use it. But if there is no way for them to use it together, then you have to divide it. You have to divide it day by day. The Be'er HaGoyla points out it's not that you could divide it day by day, that you're koife, that there's a koifin them to do the divisions of time, whether it's day by day or whichever other division of time would work. I already know that it's just like it says 1 year doesn't mean 1 year, but it could mean a little bit less than a year, a little bit more than a year. But here also one day doesn't mean specifically 24 hours for each. It could be divided in a way that each one should be able to do it. That's how the Smeh over here explains it. That is an akudah from the Ramah, from the Mechaber. The Ramah over there towards the end of the Sif says that if they did not make a division between them, and one of them used it for a very long time, for a few years himself, then the other one can't come and say, get out, and since you used it for 3 years before pre-Chalukah, I'm going to also use it now for 3 years, and then we'll start doing the division. Why? Because up until the time that Chalukah was done, we say that they were partners, and each one used what he had, and he had a right to use it. Only one person used it. It's by choice of the second one that he chose not to use it. If he chose not to use it, it's his problem. He can't start now retroactively recalculate all the amount of time. Now, the Erech HaShulchan over here in Sifkat and Vav brings a tshuva of the Rashbash, where the Siman Kuf Lamed Tes. The Rashbash over there says that you have two Yarshim. One, and they Yarshin together, a big house and a small house. And together, one person happens to be that one person, for whatever reason, maybe had a bigger family, used the bigger house for a few years, and the other one used a small house. And he says that the person who lived in the small house could come later and say, even though there's no Chalukah done yet, could come later and say, you used the big one for a while, I want to use the big one for the same amount of time, and then we'll start the Chalukah equally. Let me first even out with you what you use. And the Erech HaShulchan points out that the Rashba disagrees with it. From the Rashba it's mashma that it doesn't go like that. But rather, like the Mechaber writes, the Ramah writes, that you start and it's also mashma the Beis Yosef himself, the way Beis Yosef writes also the same thing, that you start from the moment you start the Chalukah, you determine the Chalukah at that point when you start calculating how much each person has over there. The Divrei Geonim brings this Rashbash, and he says it's pretty clear that the Rashbash disagrees on the Beis Yosef who brought the Rashba, and disagrees on the Ramah here, which also brought this Rashba. So it's not like they're equal, but that even, which is mashma from it, that if you have, even by, or not even, because the main things that we're discussing is by Yershim, that by Yershim, even if one used for a while the bigger house, the other person, before the definition, before the chalukah kicks in, there's no cheshbonah. So it would be at that point they would start doing the cheshbon. They would start doing a cheshbon again. Now the big question that comes up over here is, why was only one using it and the other one wasn't using it? So if we're talking about the din of the Rashbash, okay, well, one is a big house, one is a small house. But according to the Ramah, why was one person using it, one person was not using it? What happens if somebody does not let the other person use it? The chalukah didn't happen. The reason why I used for 3 years and the other person was not able to use it is not because he had a right to use it, because I blocked him. The Mata Shimon over here in the Goz B'S Yosef Ois Chafei says that obviously this whole din of the Ramah is talking about when Shimon had a right to use it while Reuven was there while Reuven was there, and he chose not to use it. But if he blocked him from using it for whatever reason, or somehow he blocked him from using the shared property, so obviously that at that point that when you do the official chalukah, you go retroactively and you start calculating from there. He doesn't explain this logic behind it, but the svara, essentially, the svara of it, and this is, by the way, before we get to the svara, the same thing is also in Pamay Nezav, in a little bit different language. The Pamay Nezav says that only the din of the Ramah is only if each person was able to use it. There was enough for the second person to also use to use the property, because he had a chelik in the property, and he was able to use whatever, if he was able to use his part of the chutzah. But if not, then we don't say that. Then we don't say that you start the chalukah for another. The svara behind it is very simple. Chalukah means that we decide that we're no longer partners. We're no longer shutfim. Sometimes the decision is by mutual consent. Sometimes the decision is because somebody just walked out, or somebody forced the other person out of the business. So or forced the other person out of the property. So the chalukah technically begins the moment, basically what the Mata Shimon is saying, and Pamay Nezav is saying also is, no, you can't make somebody lose. Chalukah begins at the moment that one person did an action that he shows, I'm no longer living in the same, I'm no longer operating as equal partners, or whichever cheshbon percentage of the partners is. So since at that point that's what happened, so at that point, so you do go retroactively. So if 3 years ago he kicked him out of the property, and he no longer has access to the property, so 3 years, so now when you're going to come to Bezdin and start doing the chalukah, the first thing that's going to happen is Shimon is going to come and say, now I have 3 years of credit over here, whether it's in the big house or whether it's in the whole field, whichever case we're going to talk about, and we'll start from that point. From that point onwards, happens to be a different going. Nim also was medayik and Klal Kuf Siman Hey also is medayik the same way that also it only applies if the person was not able to do it. But this is all according to these people. The Rabbi Akiva Eiger over here seems to understand. Chadush Rabbi Akiva Eiger over here on this seif understands it pshutei kamashmai. Even if he had no option to use it, no way of using it, because there was no din chalukah, because there was aimed din chalukah, it was too small, whatever the reason is, still we only start from the moment the chalukah is officially established. Erech Lechem also understands the mechaber like this.
They argue with Pamay Nezav. I'm not arguing with the Mata Shimon.
Yeah, could be the only arguing. No, it seems like they're arguing with not when you block somebody out. When you block somebody out, you made an action. But when a person cannot use it, like Pamay Nezav says, at that point, it doesn't mean that the chalukah starts. Obviously, if they're doing this form of chalukah, maybe they were inside the Erech Lechem, inside the Chadush Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and it's mashma similarly is mashma from the Aruch HaShulchan also, and the Churas Shai. They all seem to imply now that we follow the Shulchan Aruch Kipshutei. However, what the Mata Shimon says is something which makes more sense regardless. If you essentially forced the chalukah to kick in earlier. Now, the Chachma Shloime over here adds that if it's something which was made for a rental, there were partners in a rental property, specifically, or they're shutfim, not shutfim, they're yarshim in a property that the father was yashin, gave them, that it's a rental place. And one of them lived over there. So he has to, when they do the chalukah, he has to retroactively pay him rent for all the time that he used it, that it wasn't able to be rented out, the half that he used. So if there was 2 halves and it was made to be rented and he used both, so his half, do whatever he wants with it. But the other person's half, he's supposed to let the other person do it. Now he hijacked it and used it for himself. He has to pay that amount. Now the same, similar to the Mata Shimon, is also a Minchas Pitim, which is much later. Over here in the name of Shuvah's Beis Shleima, that if you prevent them from going in and using it, is also you have to. He doesn't say that you retroactively do the chalukah. What he says is you pay him rent for the amount of time that you blocked him from using his chelik. So according to the Mata Shimon, you retroactively recalculate, which even according to the Ramah, obviously according to the Rashbash, it's nishkin shayla b'chalot, you retroactively calculate. Talking about according to the Ramah, according to the Rashba, Ramah, and etc. The Minchas Pitim and also later ones, they say that no, you don't recalculate it. Rather, you calculate the rental that should have been in the place.
When you're able to rent out each half. If you're able to rent out each half, you're only able to rent out the whole thing.
If you're only able to, that's in the Sivis, it talks about if you rent out the whole thing.
The Sivis says that even if you can rent out only the whole thing.
He says you rent the whole thing out in one shot. He says not that Reuven used it and took away from Shimon and rented it. It says Reuven took the whole property and rented it out to somebody else. So he says it's Pashutu, even though he's the one who managed it, Pashutu, that even before Chalukah, that the schar is divided between the two. The fact that one person managed it and rented out his half, and also B'derech Agav took and rented out the other person's half without his permission, even prior to Chalukah, still means that all the money will be divided between the two. Now, before I continue to Sif Tes, I'm going to take a break for a second, or for a few minutes, because we discussed in the past 2 shiurim the concept of whether there's Gudei Yogud by Shutfim or there is no Gudei Yogud by Shutfim. We brought this, whether you could say Kimli, you can't say Kimli, you follow like the Shach, you don't follow like the Shach, but Poil today and Batidin. We do say Gudei Yogud by Shutfas, but there are 2 Chuvas from the Tzemach Tzedek, and it's mashma not like that. You could be medayik one way or the other, but it's 2 Chuvas from the Tzemach Tzedek. One I printed in the book, one I didn't. The one that I printed in the book, I'm going to get to in a second. First I'm going to do the one I did not print in your book, which is Choshen Mishpat Siman Ches, which over there, it's not talking about Gudei Yogud, the bulk of the tshuva. It's talking about Dinei Yerusha, and how much you consider the father's das. And there's it's a long tshuva. Ois Vav, in the middle of Ois Vav is divided into 4 big paragraphs. And one of the paragraph, Dibra Maschil Mishneh, over there, Bein Advarim, the Tzemach Tzedek explains that and the Kuda, which is relevant to what we learned. He says, on the Ramah, we know what the Ramah says, that if a poor person in Sivav, which we're going to get to that a poor person can't say, according to the Ramah, according to Mechaber, a poor person could say, oh good, I will borrow money, take it, and then buy your half, and then sell the whole thing to somebody else. According to the Ramah, a poor person cannot come and say, I'll borrow money, buy your half, and then sell everything to the other person. And Tzemach Tzedek points out, why is that? He says, very simple. Because al pi svara, you're supposed to look at what the kavanah of the father who was Meidish was. What's the kavanah of the father who was Meidish? That it should remain in the family. Otherwise, the father could have sold it himself and given the kids the money. He wanted the house to remain within the family. So if you're going, Huh?
How was he?
What do you mean? He's dead now, right? That's how he was Meidish it. But he could have sold it before he died and given him the money. Fact is, he wanted the house to remain within the family. That's why he lived there. That's why he was Meidish it to his kids. So yes, good yogud applies because good yogud means one brother is going to stay there, so at least he'll still remain within the family. But if both of them are going to be kicked out, that the father was not agreed to, and he's medayik that from the Rashba, and from the Rosh, I mean. That's how he's medayik. It's just a side note that Tzemach Tzedek over there brings over there. And from there it looks like, and here it only looks like, that Tzemach Tzedek calls it Gudei Yogud, really the discussion of Gudei Yogud is by Yorshim, not by Shutfim. Yeah, but this is only, like the Shach. Because if it would be also by Shutfim, or, again, it's not so clear, maybe you could say that according to, or if you want to say that there is Gudei Yogud by Shutfim also, then by Shutfim, the din of the Ramah would not apply according to Tzemach Tzedek. If you say it's Gudei Yogud by Shutfim, then based on this understanding of Tzemach Tzedek, the only reason why the Ramah was Machmer is because Das HaMoirish, there's no Das HaMoirish by Shutfim. You could say there's Das HaShutfim, which is something else, which is the whole basis, whether there is Gudei Yogud by Shutfim or not, is based, do we look at the original thought, or do we look at the Shalom Bayis problems now? Maybe it would be mutter for a poor person if he's a shutif. But Tzemach Tzedek understands that if we understand that there is Gudei Yogud by Shutfim, and we take this explanation of Tzemach Tzedek as that is the reason, because Tzemach Tzedek is medayik from the mocker of the Ramah. The Ramah takes it from the Rosh. Tzemach Tzedek is medayik that from the Rosh. So therefore it would seem that this din that the poor person cannot say, I'll borrow money and I'll buy the whole thing and sell it to somebody else, would only apply by Yerushim, not by Shutfim. But is it taka that Tzemach Tzedek holds that there's no Gudei Yogud by Shutfim? It seems pretty clear from Siman Chavdalad in the Tzemach Tzedek. And that is in your book in page 56.
That's part of you say the same thing about Shutfim also.
What?
That two partners, they want that they should be staying in the same. The whole idea is we can't stay together.
But here we have them in front of us. We don't have to guess what was the original intent.
In other words, Chacham won't say you can say now Gudei Yogud to take everyone out of it. It's not fair. One of us just taking it.
That's only if they're living there. If they buy for business, the point is to make money. So it's not that we made a partnership that only I should make money and you shouldn't.
No, they're not shutfim, and in fact they're living together now. So
Can say.
none of us should live. Same start.
We could say that, yeah. But anyways, if you look in Siman Chavdalad, which is on page 56 in the white book, you get to it later, which is a full tshuva only on Gudei Yogud. Seems pretty clear that Tzemach Tzedek is noita that there is no Gudei Yogud by Shut. We'll deal with it to summarize, see what the Tzemach Tzedek says. What was the story over there? And again, you will soon see. You could argue both ways over here, but we'll soon see what it is. And that is as follows. The story was two people rented together behemoths from the Saroir, rented 10 behemoths together. They're in charge of milking them. For 1 year, at the end of the year, one person tells the other, we can't be partners anymore in renting these cows together because we're in a dispute. So either Reuven should next year rent all the behemoths, and give Shimon, this is what Reuven says. Reuven says, either I'm going to rent all the 10 behemoths and give you 3 ruble for the year, which is the profit that you made, or you rent all the behemoths and give me 3 ruble profit. And Shimon says, no, I'm not interested. I want to continue being shutuf with you and continue renting the behemoths together. So the simplest way to look at it would have been, based on what we learned and what we're going to soon discuss in Siftes about whether there is Gudei Yogud by Schirus or not. But Tzemach Tzedek doesn't go into there. Tzemach Tzedek goes to a whole different angle. The Tzemach Tzedek begins by discussing whether there is Gudei Yogud by Yerushim only or also by Shutfim. And Tzemach Tzedek begins by bringing the opinions that Gudei Yogud only by Yerushim, not by Shutfim. This is the Rosh in the name of the Ria Levi, Muki Yosef in the name of the Ra and Rabbeinu Yoina. And he brings the reason. The reason for it is because it doesn't make sense that people are going to become partners for the purpose of one person kicking somebody else out. And the Tzemach Tzedek then says, but from the Rambam Taka it's mashma, it's pretty clear that it's Gudei Yogud even by shutfim, and the Tzemach Tzedek right away says, and the Raiva disagrees on the Rambam that there is no, that seems like there's no Gudei Yogud, that seems like the Raiva holds, Karav Lema, there's no Gudei Yogud by shutfim. Tzemach Tzedek then also proves from Taisvis that there's no Gudei Yogud by shutfim, only by Yarashim. And that's what Tzemach Tzedek pretty much summarizes the opinions in Ois Aleph, summarizes all the opinions that hold there's no Gudei Yogud by Shutfim, or there is Gudei Yogud by Shutfim, and he essentially hangs the daya that there is Gudei Yogud by Shutfim on the Rambam. Starts Sif base, and Tzemach Tzedek is Maksha on the Rambam. And he says that, first of all, why isn't the Rambam considering the Das HaShutfim? From the onset, originally, they were planning on becoming Shutfim together. You should consider their Das. It's not like Yerushim where they were thrown into this together and they didn't have a choice in how to think. And he proves from the Gemara that there are certain scenarios where you go after Das Av even after he passes away. And some of them are in the Tur and the Siman. Not in the Shulchan Aruch, but in the Tur and the Siman, that you go after Das Av even after his death, which means that the original Das still kicks in. So if by Yerushim it's like that, by Shutfim, which is similar, which we're comparing it to Yerushim for Gudei Yogud, we should have the same thing. Look at the original machshava that started in the beginning. What was the reason based on what they became? They became Shutfim, and the Tzemach Tzedek brings that actually from the Rambam and somewhere else when it comes to dinim in Yerusha. It's mashma taka like that the Rambam taka holds that we mischashev and Das Av. So therefore, that we consider the father's opinion. So why over here we don't do it? So he says, Taka, you have the day of the Maggid Mishnah. The Maggid Mishnah holds that, the Maggid Mishnah explains, why are you not considering the Das of the Meikare, the Das HaShutfim Meikare, that their Das was to remain partners?
The question is not about Das Av, that's what should.
Yeah, he brings a raya from Das Av. Yes, original Das HaShutfim.
But only in one case we go after Das Av. Only in the case where he wants to borrow.
Yeah.
That's the only case that we go after Das Av.
Yeah, but the Tzemach Tzedek goes into it. It says L'maisa we do follow Das Av in certain scenarios. Okay. Why do we say that? Maybe we follow Das Av and other things. Maybe that logic should apply over here. We should also follow.
If we follow, then we follow.
We do. Well, wait a minute. We follow Das Av when it came in the previous truth. We discussed. We follow Das Av. Das Av was Meidish. It should remain in the family.
Right. No, that's the only case where you follow Das Av. The all other cases we don't.
Right, but this is specifically the case when two people own something together.
No, so I'm saying in one case we follow Das Av. So in that one case.
When they own it together.
What?
When they own it together.
Yeah.
So over here also they're owning it together, and maybe we should also follow the original Das HaShutfim, what they established together. They should remain partners, and one person cannot push out the other person.
And the question is, so if somebody following the same thing, why don't you always follow Das Av?
You can also ask that, and why don't we always follow us? But in what? In when the father wanted they should remain within them. The question is, if the father wanted it should be only for rentals, and they decide to move into it, do we follow Das Av or don't follow Das Av? There's a discussion about that also. So he says the Maggid Mishnah Taka explains that when it comes to Gudei Yogud by Shutfim, it's because, like we know already, that originally they thought they're going to be able to get along, and now they have Shalom Bayis problems, and therefore there is good Gudei Yogud. Then the Tzemach Tzedek says, well, maybe we could take it from a different angle. Maybe when do we say that you have to mischashev and Das HaShutfus? When there was, and he compares it to Dinim and Kedushin and in Savra v'Kibel, when there was a Tanai Gomer, when there was a clear, complete condition between them, that this is how the Shutfus is going to be. But if there's no clear condition, like decision between them, a clear Tanai Gomer that they're going to remain partners, then we shouldn't consider the Das HaShutfim. So he says no. When you have a raya mefureshes, and then he brings from Savra v'Kibel, when there's a clear raya that the woman knew a certain pagam, and even though there's no Tanai that she was mekabelet, she knew there was a certain pagam, and we see that she was mekabelet, so we don't need a Tanai Gomer. So therefore, over here also, being that we see that they're shutfim, we don't need to have a specific t'nai. And therefore, Tzemach Tzedek says it seems like Tzemach Tzedek is mashma, it's more mistaber, like the daya that there is no good good by shutfim. That's what Tzemach Tzedek concludes Ois Beis. Ois Gimel is very short, and Tzemach Tzedek says we don't need to have this whole discussion because over here we're talking about schirus, and we're not talking about the middle of the schirus. We're talking about renewing the schirus for next year, which soon going to explain exactly what that means. And even though l'chayra one person could say to the other, you rent 5 and milk them, and I'll rent 5 and milk them, it's not good enough because it's not enough financial, it's not worth it financially to only rent 5 cows. So he says, no, if you want to say good yagud, he says that doesn't apply. If you want to say good yagud, only after, even if you want to say good yagud by shutfim and by seichrim, it's only after the schilus kicked in, after the schilus already finished. It's essentially before the new schilus. So therefore, the whole good yagud doesn't apply over here, but actually only the dinim of asogas gvul. That's how the Tzemach Tzedek concludes. In the Tzemach Tzedek, there's a few added words in the tshuva over there. It says that all of this is madura kama, sif gimel is madura kama v'tzarechil. That's how it ends, but I'm not sure if that is added by the Tzemach Tzedek or not. In the old Kisviyad, not from the Tzemach Tzedek, not talk as those words are already there. Huh? Sif gimel. Sif gimel. It's a sif gimel humi madura kama. No, the explanation that in this case it doesn't apply. He doesn't mention the end by schirus Rama. He just says that the schirus already concluded, so we don't even have to go into discussions. Now they're discussing a new year. And it's not the Gildea, it's the din of Asagas Gimel. So he says the whole thing is, in addition it says the Sif Gimel is Madura Kama v'Tzarechil. But the rest of it is not tzarechiyun on the first two, where the Tzemach Tzedek pretty clearly seems to imply that there is no good yagud by shutfim. I told you, all but today we do good yagud by shutfim, but it's just good to have it in the back of your mind. And the reason for it is because we already said there are those that hold that you can't even say kimli, like the shach, because it's not mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch. But over here, if you have this, at least it's enough to be able to say kimli.
Why should you go after it?
Huh? Because the Tzemach Tzedek doesn't paskin that. He says neither. That's more mistaber to say like those days. No, I don't know. Maybe if you need to, you could always use it. But to say clearly that Tzemach Tzedek paskins that there's no good yagud by shutfim, you can't say that because Tzemach Tzedek doesn't say that. Tzemach Tzedek explains the svaras, and it goes back and forth and says it's more noted to the svara that there is no good yagud by shutfim. Tzemach Tzedek doesn't paskin clearly that ain't din good yagud by shutfim. So from this we move to Siftes, where it discusses the dinim of good yagud by schirus. Over there the Mechaber says if one person rented part of a field from somebody else, or two people rented together a field from a third party, each person could tell the other one, you rent my part, and so to speak buy out my part and pay me, or I'll rent out your part and I will pay you. And that's only if there is no din chalukah. Obviously if there's din chalukah, you do din chalukah. Obviously, now that we know that it's a Tzemach Tzedek, obviously we're talking about the middle of the term of the schirus, not when you're renewing the schirus from new. When you're renewing the schirus from new, it's a different discussion. We're talking about the middle of a term of schirus, two people rented together, and now they got into a fight half a year into the term. So over there, according to the Mechaber, one could tell the other one, you rent my part or I'll rent your part, and if there's din chalukah, what's the reason for it? Pretty simple. Yeah, the same logic that the Mechaber follows earlier, the logic of the Rashba, by shutfim bechlal is good yagud. It seems like the Mechaber holds this. Grad the Pamoinez over here mentions that this is a raya that the Mechaber holds that there is good yagud by shutfim, because it's talking about the people two seichrim renting it together by shutfas. Yeah, but the reason for it is the same as the reason by shutfim. They joined together. They thought they're going to be able to get along, but probably they're not getting along. So to prevent any problems of shalom bayis, we have to do good yagud. The Ramah right away adds, yes, there's no chalukah, there's no din chalukah in something which is rented. So you can't, even if there's din chalukah, you don't split something which is rented. And the Ramah tells you, go look in Siman Shin Tazayin, over there, what the Mechaber writes. What does the Mechaber write in Siman Shin Tazayin? Seemingly exactly the opposite of what it writes over here. I mentioned it in the past. This Mechaber mentioned again, there's two people that rented a house together to live in it. And and one person can't walk out and say, I'm bringing a different tenant instead of me, even if that tenant has less family members than me. And when they also can't force him to, you could say, I got along with you, I don't get along with other people. You also can't force him to move out, or to make, I can't force him to make you can't force him to make a chalukah, to split the house in two. And the Ramah over there says, V'yesh chokim looking Siman Kufayin Aleph. Yeah? But over here, the Ramah sends you to there. Seemingly it's a clear contradiction from the Mechaber over there to the Mechaber over here. And that's what the Smeh over here right away points out. Over here, the Mechaber holds that there isn't chalukah by schirus. Over there, in Siman Shin Tazayin, the Mechaber holds there's no din chalukah by schirus. The Smeh explains, okay, well, we can answer then that the difference between the two is, over here we're talking about Sodar Chatzar. Sodar Chatzar, there's no Hezekriya. Therefore, din chalukah would only be a mark on the ground where chalukah is, and it's not going to make anybody lose anything. So therefore, it's without putting up a mechitzah. If you're not going to put up a mechitzah in a rented property, it's fine. And in the house where people are living, there is hezekriya, so you would need to put a full mechitzah, and that you cannot put mechitzahs up in a rented property. That's what the Smeh says. The Tas says this chiluk makes absolutely no sense. Whether you're going to put up so when do we have this concept that you can't put up a wall in the rented property? That's not the reason. Yes, there's a difference between the two, and yes, it's similar to what the Smeh writes, but it has nothing to do with whether you could put up a wall or you can't put up a wall. Look at the Lashonis of the Mechaber over here. Over there, when they became partners, it says, you can't be koi for him to put up a mechitzah. What does that mean? You can't be koi for him to put up a mechitzah. Usually when you're partners in something, and you have to put up a mechitzah for hezekriya, both people participate in it, and both people lose out from each one has to share some of the space to lose out from it. So over there, because originally they started as shutfim, and that was their original intent, one person cannot force the other one to participate in the payment of the wall or participate in the space of the wall and lose out from it. But over here, it's not a problem, because over here you're doing a chalukah in the ikra chatzar, you're not doing anything which is going to cause somebody any loss, you're not doing a mechitzah. And it happens to be, if you look at the shach in Siman Shin Tazayin over there, the exact opposite of everything over here. He taka holds it even in the house. Even in the rented house, you could force somebody to put up mechitzas. He disagrees with he paskins like the yesh cholkim of the Ramah over there, which would mean that he understands the Mechaber over here to say that there is din chalukah by davar asachor even in a house. Now the way the Nesivus rewrites the Smeh, seems like the Nesivus puts the Smeh on the Ramah, and he's explaining the Ramah, which means the way that it seems like the Nesivus understood that from the Smeh, that the Ramah is not choylek on the Mechaber. The Ramah tells you, go look in Siman Shin Tazayin, so you'll see there are certain scenarios where there is, and certain scenarios where there isn't. That the Mechaber is talking about when there is hezekriya, and therefore chalkim, and the Ramah is talking about when there is no hezekriya, and therefore ein chalkim. So even though the Ramah begins with the words v'yesh chalkim, the Siva says they're not chaylik. But again, how are you going to fit that into the Ramah which says v'yesh chalkim? No, I frag him in the Sivas. The oitza, and if you look in the Kesef HaKochim, who do we follow? So from the Kesef HaKochim, you could understand that he paskins like the Ramah. You can understand he doesn't paskin like the Ramah. There's no, some understood the Kesef HaKochim that he's machriya like the Ramah. Some understood the Kesef HaKochim is not machriya like the Ramah. The Mata Shimon clearly writes that we paskin like the Ramah, and he brings Mekairis that we paskin like the Ramah. There is no din gudei yagud by schirus, and he says, and even if you say that there is gudei yagud by schirus, it's strong enough because of these people. Even when he's talking about for the Sfaradim, they could say kimli like the Ramah that there is no gudei yagud by schirus. The Aruch HaShulchan adds an important point over here, which common sense, but we already know it from the beginning of the Siman, that obviously if they made a t'nai between them not to do a chalukah, the t'nai remains in place, and they cannot do a chalukah. The Avnei Choshen comes with changes the whole story. What are we talking about over here in the Siman Kuf Ayin Aleph? When they rented it not to live. Look at the cases. They rented it for profit. They rented it together for the purpose of either renting out to other people or whatever it is. And therefore, the Mechaber over here holds that if there's going to be if they're able to, then they don't get along and they're able to rent it out to a third party. Yeah? Or they'll do gudei yagud, and then each person could rent from the other person, or each person takes over, or they'll split, or whichever way it's going to be. And they each will make more money. And he doesn't say what happens if they don't make more money, just don't lose, but it seems like it's the same thing. Then, koifin, you do a chalukah. That's what the Mechaber is talking about, because the whole purpose was to make money. So if they're for making more money, for sure you could do. That's what the Mechaber is talking about over here. They rent it out to make money.
They rented it to rent it out.
Yeah, to profit. Yeah, they rented it for other reasons. Some people rent people have commercial leases for 10 years. They rent a massive floor of a building which is empty. They put up walls where they make offices. They have a long-term lease, and Shalom Yisrael, they make money off it. Yeah. So he says, but when that's why there is din chalukah, etc., etc. But if that was not the reason for renting it out, for renting this place together, rather the Shintazai is talking about that they rented it to live, and that's why the case of this talking about that I can get along with you, I can get along with somebody else, etc., etc. So over there, the Olam Mishpat says that actually, the Avnei Choshen says that it's as if they made a t'nai that they're not going to split it. That's why they rented it out together. If two people decide they're going to become roommates in this house, it's as if they made a t'nai, they're not going to split it. So therefore, it's like a t'nai, and therefore, in that case, you can't say that there is din. Therefore, over there, the Mechaber says there's no din chalukah. He says, but still, you could argue this doesn't fit into the lashon of the Mechaber. So he says you can't be machriya that this is the svara samachlekes. But he concludes. He says at the end of the day, you want to follow the Smer, which says that it's whether you're doing it in mechitza, there's a difference between here and Shintazai. You're doing it in mechitza, you are koyfim mechitza, you're not koyfim mechitza. Like the Taz, or if it's according to the Smer that you put up a mechitza, you can't put up a mechitza in the rental, etc. So kol efrida and now bezin, let the bezin see how much, what was the original terms of their schirus, what was their original thought process, and what would the loss be for them through making a mechitza. Now, although there's other Sifim over here, I see them backed up. I'm going to jump to Sifyut Gimel. The reason why I want to skip to Sifyut Gimel and Yudalid is because we can yesh mokum baldin loymar that when two shluchim or two people run a ma'aseh together, this is what it applies to do gudei yagud. Sifyut Gimel is talking about when you have something which is not the same value and not the same use, or maybe the same value but not the same use. You own two slaves. One slave knows how to cook. One slave knows how to sew. Or you own two kalim, a hammer and a pliers. Yeah, or much bigger than that. You own a tractor and a truck. Yeah, how can you do chalukah on two things that are not the same, even though they might be worth the same? Each, and they're partners in both. One cannot tell the other one, you take the shivcha nozer cook, I'll take a shivcha nozer so. Why? Because each one of them could say, I need somebody who could cook. I need somebody who could sew. We have a business or whatever, whether it's a restaurant or whether it's something else. I need the person who knows how to cook also. And the same thing will apply if they have one person if they both together own a field and a vineyard, and neither of the fields and the vineyards have enough to do din chalukah for whatever the cheshbon of din chalukah is in these ones. So therefore, you cannot say over there, he says one cannot tell the other one, force the other one, say you take one, I will take one. And he says, and also the Mechaber says you can't even say good yogurt for both together. You can't say, okay, we own two things together, I'll offer you $100,000 for both, for your share in both. Or you buy from me my share in both for $100,000. Rather, how do you do it? First you say good yogurt on one, then you say good yogurt on the second. So first you take the Sodeh, and you say, okay, well, let's do good yogurt on this one, then you take the Kerem and say, let's do good yogurt on this one. Why is it that one cannot force the other one? So we already know from the Mechaber, the Smeh points it out also, because each person could say, I need what the both usages, right? By a shivcha or even by a kerem or by a soda, whatever the situation is. But the Smeh over there adds that if he gives him the option to choose one of the two, he doesn't say, I'm going to take this, you take that, or the other way around. If he gives him the option to choose one of the two and says, give me the difference in price, or you could purchase both, buy my part, or I will take one and I'll give you the difference in price, or you take both, any of these four options, then it works, according to the Smeh.
If you say good and argument are both together.
Not together.
So you say both of them together, pay me for both.
Pay for both, yeah.
So why is that? It's just easier to just do each one separately. Why is it trying to do both together? What is the game of that?
So this is what the Taz understands. The Taz says the Smeh is not referring to the way the Taz understands the Smeh is that you have to give him both options at the time together. You have to tell him either you get to choose which one you want, or buy both. It means you can't tell him, there's four options, there's two options in the Smeh. Option number one in the Smeh is choose one or buy both. Option number two in the Smeh is choose one or I'll buy both. Yeah, that's what the Taz understands the Smeh. The Taz says no, you don't even need to do. You don't have to add both options together. You could just offer one option. You could just tell them, if you want, you choose. You get to choose which one you want, and then we'll even out the price afterwards, and that's fine.
So you can't tie that one both?
You could tie that one both. Yeah. Or you could tie that one both. Well, you don't have to give. You don't have to give both options.
You don't have to always give the option. To
Yeah.
both
No. According to the Taz, no. He says, when he tells him, I want to buy from you, you buy my chelik, or I'll buy your chelik. But if he tells him, if he tells him choose one or take both, he doesn't say I'm going to take both. He says either you choose whichever one you prefer, and then I'll take whichever one you don't want, or buy both. So he's not telling him good or yogurt. He's giving him a buyout. He's giving him a buyout option. He's not doing good or yogurt. Essentially, it's not good yogurt. That's what the Smeh says. It's not good yogurt. Good yogurt is when I tell you, either you buy me out or I'll buy you out. Over here, I'm not telling you buy me out or I'll buy you out. I'm telling you you could choose one because we're partners, or if you don't want to choose a specific one, you can take both.
Both of these options are problematic.
They're all problematic. The problem is that you can't split it, so how are you going to deal with it?
Because I can turn it back. Either I want both, or I can turn it back. I only need one.
So he takes only one. Choose one. So he tells him, choose, we're partners, right? Choose one, or choose both.
If he says, either take one or take none.
Huh?
So you can't say either take one or take none.
The other person could respond to him, you take both. Now the Mechaber of the continues, but if they have the equal price and equal use, then each one could say good yagud. And what does it mean, good yagud? It means that each one takes one, not that you sell both together. And the Smeh over there says, it's clear from here that you can't, again, over here also, you can't say good yagud on both together. Why? Because it's similar to what we're going to see in the next sif, when you have two houses, and each one has less than din chalukah, so neither of them can tell the other ones, because neither the house of din chalukah, I want to either I buy both or you buy both, because you can't throw a guy out of his nachalasai. Yeah, so what is good? So how does good yogurt work in this scenario? Because they're both equal prices and equal things. The teveya comes and says, I want to take this one. They're both equal. He says, I want to take this one and you take that one. And the nitva could then respond, no, actually I want to take the one on the right and you take the one on the left. And the nitva has the upper hand, like in every good yagud. That's how the good yagud would work in this scenario. And if it's the same equal usage but not equal price, the Mechaber over there says that you just that you can still say good yagud. And the Ramah says, how does a good yagud work in such a scenario? The one person says, you take the better one and give me the difference, or I'll take the better one and give you the difference, or you take the better one and I don't need the difference, or I'll take the better one and you don't need the difference. Whichever way it is, it all works as long as it's the same usage, even though it's not the same value. The Mechaber concludes the yesh chelkim. What is yesh chelkim? Yesh chelkim is that when it's not the same price, but it's the same usage, yesh chelkim, that you cannot then say good or yagud. Why is that? The svara behind it is because the Smeh over there right away explains, because you could say it's like two separate kinds, two shnei minim. But if it's the same price and the same usage, then there is no yesh chelkim. L'kuli alma, you say that you could do good yagud. The yesh chelkim is only on the last sentence of the Mechaber before the Ramah. If it's the same usage but not the same price, that you could still say good yagud. It's an interesting mata shimon. That what happens when you have two boiros, you own two water wells together. So in such a thing, you don't say that you don't say it's two minim even if one's better than the other one. That's the Mata Shimon says. And you could say good yagud, and you don't consider it like two minim. And the Oitzer Mishpat explains a very interesting svara behind it, and the svara applies across the board. He says, sometimes when it comes to shtei boiros, there will never be two wells which are dug exactly the same. So there are always going to be somebody's going to say, hey, I want to do a kimli like the yesh chelkim, that it's two minim, it's not exactly the same, I don't want to do good yagud. He says no. It's the way Oitzer Mishpat understands the Mata Shimon is that it's what's around the boiros. That if it's equal, let's say each boir holds 2,000 gallons, and around the boir, each boir has a property around it to be able to collect the water, and it's built pretty much the same way. Around the boir, then it's the same. But not that you're going to start looking at the actual boir and comparing every detail, because you're never going to get two things that are exactly the same. Huh?
The strength of the boir, what do you mean around the boir?
The earth around, you don't look at the actual boir.
What does it make difference, the earth around the boir? Why would that make a difference?
Because that's what you're selling. He says that's what you're dividing. He says they're dividing the area around the boir to be able to get water, the amount of water that's in the boir.
The boir, they can't have
No,
any tanks.
they can't have any tanks in the boir, no. Now in Sif Yudalad, it says you have two brothers which yarshin together two houses, one in each house has din chalukah. So al pi svara, you could say, hey, maybe we should split each house half-half, because din chalukah. Right? One person says, yeah, let's split each house half-half. The other person says, no, I'll take one house, you'll take one house. So the Mechaber says you listen to the first one, that each one takes one house, and the Smarad explains that none of them should lose. The Ramah over there continues that if there is no din chalukah on either of the two houses, you for sure divide kol shekein that each person gets one house, and you don't. Each person gets one house. Yeah, like we saw in the previous sif when it's tashmisham shaveh, each one gets one because there's no din chalukah in either. Each one gets the same. If it's two cooks, two slaves, that both of them are cooks, each one gets one slave. Huh? And obviously you don't say gud yagud on both together. Now what happens if one's bigger and has din chalukah and one does not have din chalukah? So the shach over there in Sifkat Yudal over here brings that they remain shutfim in the small one, which has no din chalukah, and the big one they'll split half and half. Yeah, and one cannot force the other one to say, I'll take the big, you take the small, and I'll pay you the difference. Or fakert, I'll take the small, you take the big, and you pay me the difference. And the shach concludes with tzarichiyun. Now, when you have two small houses, could you say gud yagud on everything together? The Smeh says the Smeh brings from the Levush that you cannot say gud yagud on the two houses together. And the Smeh adds on the Levush that not only you can't say gud yagud on the two houses together, you can't even say gud yagud on one after another like we have in the previous if. Zachar zeh. You can't even that, but rather each one should get one house, and each one gets one house. And it's mashma from the way the Smeh writes it. It's mashma that the Smeh understood that according to the Levush you could say gud yagud zachar zeh, and that's why the Smeh had to clarify that no, it's neshtazeh. The Nesivus is machriya like the Smeh, which means that you cannot say gud yagud when it's two houses Hashem within chalukah. One cannot tell the other one gud yagud on the whole package, and you can't even say gud yagud on one and then the other. The Ramah then continues that some people say when it comes to houses, it's b'chlal no din chalukah. This is the shit of the Rivash. Why? Because no two houses are the same. And you can't start dividing that there's a first floor and there's a second floor. And each room is different than the other one. There's rooms which are made for this and the rooms that are made for that. And kol shekein if they're going to have to start using, spending money to use it, and that's the shit of the Rivash. And therefore, it becomes houses become ein tashmisham shaveh, two houses, and if ein tashmisham shaveh, we say gud yagud one after another, like in the previous if. That's the mashmos of the Rivash. Yeah, that's the shit of the Rivash. Before we go further to what the Ramah then brings the shit of the Rosh Hashanah, Avnei Choshen brings the Mabit. And Avnei Choshen says, the Mabit says that even according to the Rivash, this that he's talking about is only in a scenario when ein tashmisham shaveh completely, and to an extreme. When you own two houses, and one is a store and one is a house, one's for residence and one's for selling. But if shmoiseihem shavim, they have the same name, they're both houses for living, or they're both stores, then even if they're not exactly the same, the Rivash would be maskim that there is din chalukah, so to speak, that each one gets one, and you don't say good oy agud. The Ramah then continues and says, but this is only according to the Rivash. But according to the Rosh, no, according to the Rosh, it's mashma that you could do a chalukah, a store versus a house, a bias against a store versus a house. And the Ramah adds, and that's what's mashma from the Rosh. And I'm adding to it that also same would apply, first floor versus second floor, etc. Why? Still consider tashmisham shaveh. The Smeh disagrees. It says the Ramah misunderstood the Rosh, and he says I already explained it in Prisha. If you look in Prisha, he says I already explained in Prisha that the Rosh doesn't mean that the Rosh actually seems like the Rosh would agree to the Rivash. The Taz writes on the Smeh, he gave a good question. And the halacha is like the Rivash, not like the way the Ramah understood or explained the Rosh. The Shach seems to understand the Rosh like the Ramah, but the Shach is not machriya like the Ramah. The Shach just disagrees on the Smeh and says no, the Ramah did understand the Rosh correctly. Pamein Azov, who happens to be a Sfardi, brings a whole row of Sfardi Shapaiskim that paskin like the Ramah. Yeah, so the Pamein Azov brings a whole list of them that hold like the Ramah. However, that means that that you could do chalukah even when it's not exactly equal, not like the Rivash. But the Parmein Zov takes a middle approach between the Rosh and the Rivash. And he says, what the Rosh writes, clearly we're going to follow the Rosh. When it's a house against a chanus, so like this. If each one has one, it means a house that's made for residence and a house that's made for sale. He says, if each one has its own chatzir around it, so then you could say it's equal. One will take the other one. But if it's first floor versus second floor, and it's not the same, you can't say the first one and the second floor is the same, or it's two houses which have differences between them within the same chatzir, and not each one is going to get its own independent chatzir, then we follow the Rivash. Huh?
Two houses in the same chatzir?
Two houses in the same chatzir, not each one is going to end up with the same chatzir. Then we're going to follow the Rivash. The Avnei Choshen that we made over there brings a very interesting thing. He says the Maisa we have a machlokes, and whenever there's a machlokes, we already know from the Ramah that chalukah is better than remaining together. So if chalukah is better than remaining together, it's mashma from the Avnei Choshen that if you have chalukah is better than remaining together. So if we have a machlokes and we could find somebody's going to say do chalukah, we'll follow that opinion. So therefore, it seems like he's pretty much paskening like the Rosh without saying that he paskens like the Rosh. I guess we're going to stop here.